So hi again, everyone, and welcome to this second seminar, obfuscation seminar, focused on the detection and attribution modeling framework. So I'm Joachim Estopinian from the CNRS, and I'm going to try to introduce you some of the methods that we have been working on or discovering in part, especially of the task 3.1. So, okay. Okay, so to start with, we are all witnesses some biodiversity losses. So at different scales, different levels, for instance, at the level of species extinctions, but also at the level of ecosystems and communities. But at times it can be quite hard to disentangle the different drivers of such losses. So that's a motivation point to look into causal inference and try to quantify more precisely the effects of some actions, some policies on a given outcome variable. So the gold standard to do so is to use randomized controlled trials where you split into a population and doing so you can balance out all the confounders that could affect the precise treatment that you want to test. But unfortunately, it's not possible always to lead such randomized controlled trials. You cannot do this because it can be unethical and possible in some ecological applications. So, for instance, you cannot easily study the effect of habitat structure on species richness when climate is a confounder. Or you can imagine that it will be hard to assess the effect of mass tourisms on species, invasive species spread. You cannot randomly assign tourists to either treatment or control group exposed to invasive species. So we have to come up with new methods, and that's where causal inference can help. So to sum up, to answer causal questions, we can use experiments. So for instance, RCTs, where we conduct interventions and we can obtain some causal quantified relationships in answer and response. And with causal inference, we are using exceptions in our theoretical framework in order to derive also causal statement, but from observational data only. So both allow to attribute causes of possibly detected changes. Now the manner to see this distinction with some graphs here. So in an interventional study, the covariates affecting both the treatment and the outcomes can be balanced out thanks to the randomization of the target population. And so thanks to this intervention, you can measure, for instance, average treatment effects, where the expected value of the factorial distributions is compared to the counterfactual distribution. And the counterfactual concept is quite important in causal inference, and it refers to what would the outcomes be for the treated units in the absence of the treatment. But in the observational setting, you cannot just balance out the effect of covariates, so observed or especially unobserved covariates. So the selection bias that is associated with the non-random assignment of the treatment precludes the direct identification of the causal relationships. So we have to find some strategies to avoid this bias. So I've looked a little bit in the literature to try to find how we can define a detectable change and an attributable change. And I found in the climate science literature some interesting definitions. So in this field, they define a detectable change as a change that is determined to be highly unlikely to occur, less than about a 10% chance, due to internal variability alone, and an attributable change as a change in which the relative contribution of causal factors has been evaluated with an assignment of the statistical confidence associated. So now, following on the climate science, I've been interested in what methods they do use to detect and attribute observed changes in the climate, so especially in the temperature. And a first main family of methods are called fingerprint methods, and they consist in regressing the observed changes onto a model-generated anticipated response patterns to forcings. And so in a second step, based on the scaling factors obtained, if the change is significant and cannot be explained by the climate variability alone, it is attributed to the corresponding forcings. And another second main family of methods used to detect changes in climate science are called known fingerprints methods, where the observed temperature, for instance, in black here on the graphs, are directly compared to climate model simulations. So, for instance, compared to simulation including both human and natural influences on the top, or natural influences only on the bottom. And if the natural variability fails to explain observations, in contrast to the case where both anthropogenic and natural influences are considered, the deviation is attributed to the forcings. So these two main class of models both rely on physics-based, as you could have seen, models simulating the anticipated patterns of anthropogenic forcings. And they usually make the assumption that the radiative forcings are external to the climate system. So no possible confounding biases are possible, and it significantly simplifies the inference. So with biodiversity data, we can let such comparable analysis based on process-based dynamic vegetation models, such as the LPG-GESS model or FATE-IHT, but so two models that are especially studied in the work package and task 3.3, but unfortunately, it's not always the case. We cannot always use such dynamical vegetation models. So in other cases, we need other tools because we lack data and processes and knowledge on the processes involved. A first family of methods to do so, to try to estimate good causal effects, are quasi-experimental methods. I'm going to introduce them quickly now. So for this part, I've based the presentation on two reviews, one from Van Bootzik and colleagues, and another one from Larsen and colleagues. And so why do we want to use such methods? Because many ecological processes take place in settings with non-random treatments and unobservable variables. And the key in using quasi-experimental methods is first to identify valid control and treatment groups, and second, to account for potential unobserved correlation between treatment assignments and outcome. So we'll briefly review five quasi-experimental methods. And to start with, how do we define a quasi-experimental methods? So actually, this family of methods are borrowed from the field of econometrics, and they are methods seeking to overcome the non-random assignment of the treatment, so we can isolate the target causal effect from observed outcomes differences between treatment and control groups. And they rely on a key assumption called the stable unit treatment value assumption that states that there is no treatment spillover or interference between the different sites considered, and also there is no different versions of the same treatment. So we have to be careful with biodiversity data on the spatial dependence between outcomes, for instance, by aggregating to large independent research units with a spatial splits. So first quasi experimental method, and probably the most well-known are matching methods. So here, in its base version, we'll consider binary treatment. So we already have some treatment and well-defined treatment and control observation, but we want to balance out the effect of confounders. So we have to group the observations with similar covariates. And so to do so, we also have to define a distance measure to create, so to group the observation from both the control and the treatment groups with similar covariates. Once it's done, we can create balance groups in order to let them contribute equally to the final effect estimated, which is not confounded with the treatment assignation effect. But these methods are very elegant and very efficient, but they rely on the strong assumption that there is no unobserved confounder. So this assumption, called treatment ignorability assumption or causal sufficiency, is quite important.
Just to explain that somehow, if you come back,
sorry. Okay.
That here the treatment and control could be forest and then disturb forest by through bark beetle, for instance.
Yeah.
So that could be the two treatment and control, and then you would like to understand whether the effect of bark beetle, for instance, vary across environmental gradients or things like that. It would be exactly this type of methods where we can apply.
Exactly.
This matching.
So here I do not have an example for this one, but yeah, it's true that it's better to link this to some examples. It will be the case for others. And so a convenient method to group the observations is to use propensity scores. And what are propensity scores? So for a given sample I, it is defined as the probability of receiving the treatment given the observed covariates. So using such probability to group the variables, to group the observations, allows to reduce the possible high dimensionality problem when we have to consider many covariates to group. So here is a review of the propensity score method with nice method explanation. And here is an example in an ecological application of such method. There are also extensions of the propensity scores method in order to consider not only binary treatments, but continuous treatments or treatments with various levels. And they are implemented in different packages, one of them being the causal GPS package. So with this method, we can lead space for time analysis, because here we do not need temporal variation. We do not need time series to indeed reach good effect estimates. So now a second method is called regression discontinuity design, and it exploits the arbitrary nature of an observed intervention, an observed change in the nature. It's not an intervention in the sense of causal inference where you do intervene in the data. It's an observed change in the nature. So it relies on the assumption the assumption that in the neighborhood of such change, such intervention, the unobserved variables are in fact equal between the treated and the control observations. So here is a small example to make it more concrete. So if you want to study the effect of thinning on bird abundances, and that the forest thinning is implemented according to two rules. First one being that forest stands are considered for thinning if they are within a 15-kilometer radius of a developed area. And the second rule, that forest stands should be bigger than 3 hectares in size. So with such setting, we could compare either the stands that are above 3 hectares in size, but either just below the 15-kilometer radius or just above this radius, or we could also compare parcels that are below the 15-kilometer radius, but either just above the 3 hectare size or just below the 3 hectare size. So we are considering that, except for the measured change, all the unobserved variables are in fact equal at the frontier, at the cutoff of the change. So another class of methods now are differences methods models. So there are before-after control intervention methods that work now with time series data in treatment and control groups. So this class of methods rely on the assumption, on the parallel trends assumption, stating that if not for the treatment, control and treatment groups would have parallel time trends. And it allows to control for time invariant unobservables. So here we want to estimate the treatment effect, which is defined as the difference between the before-after treatment differences for the treated and the non-treated observations. And some extension of the DID methods exist to include the covariates, because in this base version, it's only based on the outcome variable, but also to include different timing of treatment. So here is an illustration of the Backy contrast, so the before-after control intervention methods with different detection methods, moreover. So here, if we consider a detection method where we measure the average value before the intervention or after the intervention, on the left, we only consider the treatment variable, and on the right, we consider the Backy contrast, so the difference between the treated variable before and after the intervention, and it's the same for the control group. And if we use a different detection method, actually for the same data points, this figure illustrates that we can, in fact, obtain different causal effects, so stating the importance also of the detection method that is being used. And for a third detection method, so based on immediate change, we obtain a third Backy contrast. And so some examples where such method could be used are, for instance, studying the effect of a hunting ban on elephant populations. And so to my understanding, it suits quite abrupt changes where we already have well-defined treatment and control groups, so more in the setting of an impact evaluation. And so a fourth method, fourth quasi-experimental method, so it is called the fixed effect panel regression, and we'll present it with an example. So now the effect of forest fragmentation on songbird abundance, and we have in this setting repeated observations of the same sites over the years. So we model the outcome variable as a linear combination of the treatment variables, but more importantly, we model the unobserved latent variables either as site-specific but time invariant, or as site invariant, so common to all sites but changing over time. And we'll see later that modeling the unobserved variables, so independently between time and space, is a natural connection with a causal discovery method that I'll introduce later. And here are two studies using such method in ecology. So if you're interested in such method, I recommend you to look at them. And finally, instrumental variables. So as a reminder, we want to assess the effect of a given variable X on the outcome variable Y, but we cannot do so directly because of some unobserved confounders that are blurring the effect. So with such method, we have to identify an additional variable Z, so called the instrument. And this variable Z has to verify some assumptions. So first, the instrument variable should account for some variation in the treatment X, but it should not affect the outcome variable Y or other Y determinants. And so once such variable is identified and data is available on it, we can use the instrument to eliminate the correlation between the treatment and unobservables in a two-step process. So first, we'll use the instrument variable to predict the treatment variable X hat. So using the instrument, but also exogenous variable as predictors. And in the second step, we'll use the predicted treatment X hat rather than the observed variables of the treatment to estimate the treatment effect. So to make it more concrete, here is an example where the authors wanted to study the effect of forest fragmentation on human Lyme disease incidence. And to do so, they have used an instrument variable in the land use regulations. So they started to predict forest fragmentation based on the land use regulations. And in a second step, they use the predicted forest fragmentation values instead of the observed forest fragmentation values to estimate the Lyme disease incidence. And so doing so allows to cancel out the unobservable, the confounders of the target causal effect.
But you are losing precision when you do that, I guess, because if the prediction is not very good, then you are adding another bias, which is not linked to the causality aspect, more to the quality of the prediction.
Yeah, actually, there are here it was quite simplified, but there are a lot of different criteria to try to find a good instrument, and it's not that easy to find such variable. Yeah, I have some resources at the end that explain this a lot better. Now, when should we use which quasi-experimental methods? So I'll use a review, so the same review that I've stated at the beginning, and actually it's heavily influenced by the data at hand. So if we, the first question to ask is, do we have unobserved confounders in our study? So if we do not have, we are lucky enough to not have unobserved confounders, we can use matching methods to directly estimate the effects. And otherwise, in the presence of unobserved confounders, a following question would be to ask if we have some breakpoints in the data. So if it's the case, we can use the regression discontinuity design.
What are the breakpoints in the data?
So it's some clear change between the treatment and our control groups. Back to the example, it was, for instance, the forest thinning that was implemented based on clear rules. It's clear change in the data. So it's maybe more adapted to impact evaluation, or when you have a clear difference.
No, okay. Like fire, bark beetle.
Exactly.
From disturbances.
But the inconvenience of such methods is that it requires having a high density of observations around the threshold. And otherwise, following question would be, do we have temporal variation in the treatment? Do we have time series that are centered on the treatment application? So if it's not the case, maybe you could use an instrumental variable, but as already stated, they are quite hard to find, and you need additional data. But on the good side, it can suit situation when you're not sure actually if the treatment is the cause of the consequence of the outcome variables. There are some cases where it's not that obvious. And if you do have time series available, you then to orient the choice between the two final methods. The question would be: do you want to model the unobserved latent confounders as site-specific and year-specific independently? If you can assume such setting, you'll use fixed effect panel regressions, and otherwise you can test difference in differences methods. So that's it for the second part. And now I briefly introduce causal discovery methods. So causal inference can be differentiated between two main fields. The first one being causal discovery, where the objective is to learn qualitative causal relationships, so links between oriented links between variables. And the other subfield would be causal effect estimation, where you want to quantify the causal effects given causal relationships. And here we are using the paradigm of causal network learning. So because causality can be considered between in different angles or with different definition, let's say. You may have already heard about Granger causality or nonlinear state space models, such as the CCM. Here we're considering the causal network learning algorithms. So to lead causal discovery, I need to introduce what a DAG is, a directed acyclic graph. So acyclic stands for means that there are no bidirectional relationships between the variables, and there is no feedback loops. And it's also non-parametric, which means that we do not do any assumption on the nature of the variables, their observation, and their functional form, the functional forms between the variables. So it's actually compatible with a wide range of ecological systems. And here is a small example from Arif and colleagues of a DAG used to estimate the effect of marine protected areas on reef fish biomass. So DAGs represent a researcher's causal knowledge and assumptions about the data generating process of the systems. They include all the relevant measured and unmeasured variables, and they are based on domain knowledge, theory, and research when available. And when the DAG is unknown, at least partially unknown, we can try to infer it from the data thanks to causal discovery. So how does it work? So actually, it's not magical. Causal discovery relies on strong assumptions on the distribution of the data. So the main assumptions are these three ones, so causal Markov assumption, faithfulness, and causal sufficiency that we've already seen. And this is this set of assumptions, so with at times additional ones that allow us to identify correct causal relationships and to turn in a second time these theoretical causal quantities into statistical quantities. So as a summary of assumption between your graph and your data set, here the first condition being the causal Markov condition states that all the conditional independencies that are represented in the graph should also be reflected in the data. So in your graph, if two variables are independent conditionally to a third one, it should also be the case in your data sets. And the backward assumption, faithfulness, stands that there are no additional conditional independencies in the data that are not encoded in the graph. So I have a small example to illustrate the faithfulness assumption, or more precisely a case where the assumption is violated. Here we have a very simple graph where smoking is a cause of the health, so it's affecting the health negatively. So here is the simple graph assumed, but actually in your data set you have a positive effect of smoking on exercising and indirectly on health. So in your data set, the positive effect of exercise coincidentally cancels out the negative effect of smoking on health. So actually smoking is an independent of health in the data sets. And in such setting, we'll say that the data distribution is unfaithful to the causal graph. So to let good a causal discovery, we have to make the assumption that we have not such cases. And the final assumption that I've already introduced, the causal sufficiency. So we have no unobserved confounders in our application. And so these are these assumptions that enable us to learn causal structures from data. For instance, using conditional independence tests for constraint-based methods, because there are different families of methods in causal discovery. And the first one, maybe the most famous one, are constraint-based methods. And so here I quickly introduce one of these constraints-based methods, the PCMCI algorithm that assumes causal sufficiency in its base version. So it's a causal discovery algorithm that is suited for time series, and an additional assumption is made, and is usually made with time series, is causal stationarity. So it means that the processes behind the links between the variables are actually constant in time. They are repeated across time steps. And so the conditional independence tests that are led in the algorithm can actually be repeated at every time step, since the processes are assumed to be a constant, to be repeated in time. And a nice feature, a nice point, is that with time series, when you consider a fixed window like this one, the temporal precedence helps to orient the relationships. So if you have identified a link between the variable x3 at time step t-2 on the variable x2 at time step t, you do know that the link is oriented in this direction because of temporal precedence. What happened before is necessarily the cause. So how does it work? Very briefly, it involves two steps. First one is called the condition selection step, where we try to learn conditioning sets containing the parents of each variable, considering the fixed time window already introduced. And in a second step, called momentary conditional independence, you'll try to remove the links between the time window considered based on conditional independence tests between the two nodes parents. And so such algorithm has actually a lot of variants, and one of them is well suited to biodiversity data because it allows to consider processes that you measure across different sites, so which is often the case with biodiversity observations. And here is the link with the setting of fixed effects panel regression, because in this variant of the algorithm, you're also allowing to have unobserved latent variables, but you do model them either as site-specific or year-specific variables. So if you want to know more, to discover more on these methods, I redirect you on the to the Tigromite package with a really nice example and tutorials that are available. Finally, a nice setting, a nice feature of a causal discovery algorithm is that actually it's not binary. It's not either you assume all the DAG based on expert assumption, or you infer it completely from data. You can actually include some expert knowledge in your causal search. So why do you want to do that? First, it significantly simplifies the search problem, and moreover, you'll benefit from common sense and so the expert's knowledge assumption that you know about your system. So some types of expert knowledge would be, for instance, to specify that two variables are independent. You do know that they are independent, because otherwise the causal discovery will actually test the dependency between the variables and could even find some dependency. So a weaker assumption, but a very interesting one, is to let the causal discovery algorithm test for dependence between two variables. And if it does so, you specify that the link is actually oriented in a given direction. Then you can specify both the link and the direction, the orientation, or you can only specify that there is a link between two variables, but you're actually not sure of the direction of the link. So finally, as a brief conclusion on causal discovery, there are many different families of methods. Here, I've only briefly introduced one constraint-based method, but there are also score-based methods or continuous optimization-based methods that are benefiting from machine learning, and also asymmetry-based methods. So a lot of different candidates to resolve many challenges. So here is a quite impressive figure to me, representing the different challenges in causal discovery in complex settings such as the Earth system. And so we've already crossed path with some of them. For instance, the processes can occur at different time scales. There can be some time delays. And in the data, we can have unobserved variables, or we can have a selection bias. And moreover, with a lot of different variables, with constraint-based methods, we can actually have problems of high dimensionality. So now I'll introduce another set of methods called covariate adjustment, and it's not about causal discovery anymore. Now you want to estimate some effects based on a causal graph that is established. So this is a effect estimation method that is well known. It's one of the first, but it's one among others that actually exist. So for instance, the quasi-experimental methods also estimates effects. So here is another one. So it's a small overview of what I've just been saying. So to estimate effects, you can use quasi-experimental methods as already introduced. You can use the covariate adjustment methods. So specifically the backdoor criterion that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Or you can also use machine learning algorithms such as meta-learners and the double machine learning effect estimation methods. But first, let's quickly review the covariate adjustment method, because I believe it's quite central in the field of causal inference. and so to attribute changes, to estimate good effects of a variable on another. So for that, we use this review from Arif and colleagues. So it's an overview of the structural causal model to detect good cause-effect relationships in observational data always. So with the structural causal model, we want to avoid biased estimates of effects. So here is a classic example of a bias that could occur if you're only relying on the correlation. We could find a link between the ice cream sales and the number of shark attacks. But actually, the apparent correlation is due to a confounder. So here the temperature. So we have to include the confounders in our studies, otherwise we could find very biased results. And there are, in fact, other kinds of biases that you want to avoid. For instance, you do not want to over-control when you estimate the effect of temperature on the number of shark attacks. If you over-control the effect estimation measure, you could find a biased effect of temperature on shark attack, because actually involving the number of people on the sea will change massively the effect that you measure between the temperature and the number of shark attacks. So you do not want to condition on intermediary nodes in such setting. And finally, you could have colliders. So here, if you include in your study the alarm variable that is both caused by earthquakes and by robberies, you could actually create some path, some information leak between the two variables, and they could appear as linked. So a link could be detected between earthquakes and robberies. You could actually estimate an effect on of the first variable on the second, but actually it's because of the collider. So it's quite hard to represent, to explain, but you do not want to involve the condition in your studies colliders. So here are some simple rules between triplets of variables that you want to avoid in the structural causal model. So you have to draw your die and apply specified rules on how the information flow to a condition to include in your study the good variables. So, and one of these rules is the backdoor criterion. So to make it a little bit more concrete, we'll work with this example from Adams and colleagues, where they wanted to estimate the effect of protected areas on forest species abundance. And here is the DAG that they assume between these two variables. So back to the backdoor criterion, sorry. So the backdoor criterion will allow you to know on which variable you should include or not in your effect estimation methods. So first, what is a backdoor path between the variable x and y? So it's a variable, it's a path with an arrow pointing into x. And the backdoor criterion means that states that we should identify a set of variables z that, when adjusted for, blocks all the backdoor path between x and y. It allows the interventional query p of y do x to be accurately estimated from observational data. So with observational data only, applying the backdoor criterion allows to mimic an intervention where you remove the influence of cobias on your treatment. And how do you block a backdoor path between two variables? So to block a backdoor path by conditioning on a set of variables z, you should either, if along the path there is a chain or a fork, W, you should include W in your conditioning set. Or if there is a collider, W, along your path, you should not include W in your conditioning set. So back to our example to make it once again a little bit more concrete. Here you always still want to estimate the effect of protected areas on forest species abundance, and the backdoor criterion actually identifies 9 backdoor paths that should be blocked, and so 2 of them are the path going from forest species abundance through carbon sequestration, logging, elevation, and protected area. And in this path, actually, carbon sequestration is a collider between the 2 variables, between treatment and the outcome variable. So carbon sequestration should not be conditioned on, and it's not, it's verified because it's not included as a control. And another path is the one going from forest species abundance through logging, elevation, and protected area. And along this path, elevation is a confounder, so we should condition on the elevation. So going through the 9 backdoor path, the backdoor criterion states that we should include in our study condition on slope, elevation, and distance towards entities. So actually, we do not have to do to apply such criteria by hands. There are some packages. Here, for instance, Dagity allows to automatically identify the variables from the backdoor criteria, but also Python and R packages are doing so. So now we have created the DAG. So here I skipped the step 2, consisting in verifying the consistency between the DAG and the data based on the assumption that we've already seen. And step 3 is applying a backdoor or front door criterion, which is now done. And now we have to choose a statistical model to effectively reach the causal effect. So in this setting, it is actually quite simple because here the data was simulated with a linear model. So we do know that the links between the variables are linear since they were simulated like this. So we'll choose a linear regression model to effectively measure the effect. So we try to use these linear regression models only. So species abundance is expressed as a linear combination of the treatment variable and the 3 variables that were identified with the backdoor criterion. And doing so, we effectively find the good causal target effect that is known to be 1.98 in this situation. And if we try to recover such effect, but not with only slope, elevation, and distance toward densities, but actually expressing forest species abundance as a linear combination of all the variables available, you'll have very biased you'll find a very biased effect of protected areas on forest species abundance, so almost null here. So actually doing so involving all the variables available allows to better predict the variable forest species abundance, but here it's not the objective. The objective is to measure the causal effect of protected area on forest species abundance. So the strength of such method is to allow a good estimation without requiring the availability of all the variables in the DAG. And also it's not computationally taxing, and it's compatible across linear and non-linear statistical approaches. So here, once again, we only use a linear regression model, but we could have used a machine learning model or any model. And it is widely applicable to select the covariates across observational studies. So finally, I'll quickly present causal machine learning or some subfields of causal machine learning. So where does machine learning fit in all these causal inference and detection and attribution methods? So first, we could use machine learning as a causal discovery algorithm because so we can differentiate among the causal discovery methods the combinatoric algorithms. So the constraint-based method that I've quickly introduced with the example of the PCMCI, but also score-based methods or asymmetry-based methods such as the Linga method. And so the problem with such combinatoric algorithms is that the number of possible DAGs actually increases super exponentially with the number of variables involved. So quite recently, the problem of the causal search problem has been recast into a continuous optimization problem to try to take advantage of the work that has been done in machine learning and deep learning optimization algorithm. So the first paper doing so is from 2018, sorry, DAGs with no tears. And so the motivation is to first benefit from the work, as already mentioned, on continuous optimization, but also to not impose restrictions on the functional forms a priori between variables, and to benefit also from the computational power of GPUs to make the task of learning from large, high-dimensional datasets feasible. And there are a huge number of methods that are seeing light in such domain. It is very active. So here is a little, actually a very nice review of different causal discovery algorithms that are available. Now, so not on the causal discovery side anymore, but to estimate effects, we could use machine learning to do this, and the double machine learning is an algorithm doing so. So it's a meta learner, as we call them, and it relies on the Frisch-Wolf-Lovell theorem. Also, I forgot to mention that it's assume no unobserved confounders. And so this theorem states that given a linear model between an outcome variable y, a treatment variable x, t, sorry, and some covariates x, the two following approaches to estimate beta 1 yield the same results. So first, a linear regression of y on t and x using ordinary least squares, or a three-step procedure consisting in first regressing t on the covariates x, second regressing y on the covariates, and finally regress the x residuals on the t residuals to get the beta 1 effect. Sorry, I've lost the, okay, I think I've clicked on some of one of the links available in the presentation. To make some a small break. Okay, we're back. And so with the double machine learning method, so the transition, okay, it's here. So we also using the same theorem, but actually we do not assume a linear model anymore. We are replacing the regressions from step 1 and 2 with a machine learning model that estimates first the treatment from the covariates, and after the outcome variable also based on the covariates with a machine learning model. And the third step is the same. We regress the x residuals and the t residuals to get a good to get to the target effect. So the motivation to do so is that machine learning models allow to capture the covariate interactions and nonlinearities when estimating the y and t residuals, while still maintaining the orthogonalization from the theorem is still valid. And it's also compatible with both continuous and discrete treatments, contrary to other meta-learners that I'll not introduce here. And some resources on this method, and an example. So here is a link with to an excellent tutorial on the double machine learning method, but actually almost all the methods that I've mentioned today are also described in this tutorial, which is really nicely written and quite statistics oriented. And so you can find also the double machine learning method already implemented in some R and Python packages. And here is an ecological application using double machine learning to try to estimate trends from citizen science data. And now causal interpretability. So how is it related to the explainability, the interpretability that we are usually dealing with? So traditional interpretable models can be defined as models that can explain how and why a decision is made for a given instance. And now causal interpretable models are trying to answer questions such as what would have happened with input x prime instead of x. So it's called counterfactual reasoning. And so it consists in being able to explain the decisions based on the outcomes of some alternative scenarios, and some reasoning that we are all doing on a daily basis. And so once again, it is a very active field with a lot of different methods that are seeing light daily almost. And so that's it for this part. So we've now reached the conclusion, and so some take-home messages. First, a causal inference allows to estimate correct causal effects from observational data when RCTs and model simulation are not feasible. And quasi-experimental methods aim at overcoming the non-random treatment assignment bias when estimating causal effects. Third, causal discovery helps to learn causal relationships from assumptions and data when expert knowledge is at least partially lacking. Covariate adjustment is a simple but powerful tool to estimate causal effects from an already established DAG. And finally, machine learning is driving the field, especially with continuous optimization algorithms in causal discovery and meta-learners such as double machine learning. And so now, looping with obfuscation task 3.1, we have an ongoing perspective paper with another working group also focused on detection and attribution. And we are currently designing a practical guide on biodiversity change detection and attribution. And with here a flowchart situating the different challenges and the different methods and steps available to lead good attribution, good detection and good attribution. So it's quite directly linked to the task 3.1 from obfuscation. And once the paper will be I think quite soon we'll be able to share the paper to allow you to see the progresses that we've been doing in this direction. And finally, we have also other research articles related to the DAM framework. So a first one focused on Frescalo, which is a sampling bias correction method that enable after valid detection. So it's a work led by Romain Goury, a PhD student from the CNRS. And also another paper, perspective article on how dynamic microecological patterns can help explaining biodiversity changes. So now it's a work led by Pierre Gauzère, a postdoc, a researcher from the lab that will very probably work on obfuscation too. And we're also considering a third paper, a comparative study of the sensitivity of different causal attribution methods for ecology with Miriam Beck, which is a postdoctoral researcher from the Impacts working group. And okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. And I think now it's time to open the floor to questions.